Well, it's really nice to be here, and I hope that we're in the home stretch of the session, although it feels like we're probably more at second base, but I'm hoping we're rounding third soon. Um, Yeah, I think it's been I guess the thing I would, at my overall mood in session right now probably is I feel a little like we are passing a lot of bills. There are a lot of bills that probably record number in our legislative session, which is a little startling to me. I'm not sure why we have so many, but I just hope that we're kind of getting toward the end and finishing up and looking forward to seeing what the budget process brings us this week and next. So, I mean, I don't have many more opening remarks than that. Go, Senator.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's been a very interesting session, as you know. It started out with a bang on arguing about rules and JFAC again. JFAC has worked well. The maintenance budget process seems to have moved along fine. We're doing all the trailer bills now to add to those maintenance budgets, which seems to be working fine. So I think a lot of the angst that people had about the process has eased. We're now into the throes of what do we have to get done. We still have transportation to get done. We still have launch to get done. We still have quite a few budgets that they'll finish up next Wednesday on budgeting. It normally takes us about 2 to 3 weeks from that time period when they have those final budgets set to actually sine die. So I think with what occurred in the House, they would probably tell you they lost a week to 10 days. So it's probably going to be the 29th, which would be the final Friday in the month before rather than the 22nd. But we still have a lot of work to do. We got a lot of bills that are in process. If you look at our second reading calendar and our third reading calendar, there's a lot to do. So it's going to be a busy 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh, my general philosophy of government is that we're at our best when we are efficiently delivering needed services that help the people of Idaho live their lives better, and we are at our worst when we are intruding unnecessarily on their freedoms and rights. I think the jury is very much out yet on how this session is going to turn out in that regard. A lot's going to shake out in the next 2 to 3 weeks. As the pro tem just said, it is yet to be determined whether we adequately fund the Department of Health and Welfare, education, whether 10,000 families who think their kids have money to go to college, in fact, get that money. A lot remains to be determined on whether we, in fact, deliver on those vital services and whether, in fact, we can stop some of these intrusions on people's voting rights and personal liberties, because there's a lot of those bills making their way through the pipeline that I'm hoping can be stopped. So we shall see. We're very much in the heat of things, and this can be a very good session or a very bad session, depending on what happens in the next couple weeks.
Thank you. This is my favorite time of year. There's a lot going on. Go look at the board on the House and Senate. There's bills moving, there's committees moving, there's people coming and going. This building is a hop, and it is awesome. I think that you'll see things start winding down in the next 5 to 10 days. You'll start seeing those bills transfer back and forth, and things should start slowing down a little bit, especially with the afternoon committees and the morning committees. You're seeing them hold up now that we're slowing down the introduction of bills. I think that the session will move fast. I agree with the good senator. I think we're probably a week behind our anticipated goal because of some of the little hiccups we had on the House side in particular. But things are moving. I think that once some of the big bills go through, things will slide faster. I think once 521's done, some of these bigger budgets get done, I think then things will really lay out and you'll see everybody get in the mood to get out of here and go home and run for re-election. So things are moving, things are good. Watch, it's fun. Lots for you guys to write about this time of year.
Questions?
Ruth Brown, Public Television. This is for the speaker. You swapped out a majority leader for the first in the first week session for maybe the first time ever. I think it was a historic move. How is the caucus working together to get?
First off, I didn't swap her out. The caucus did, and things have settled down. You know, Megan's a really good legislator. She's still doing amazing jobs, carrying a lot of bills. She gets things done. She's a hard worker, one of the smartest people in this building. I want to make that clear. Just got a little sideways with some of the caucus, and things are going well now. You know, they're smoothing out. There's kind of been a hiccup as a transition because she knew what to do and what not to. You kind of saw that on the floor yesterday with a little bit of the stuff that happened. But Jason's doing a good job in picking up the job now, and things are moving. But we did have that hiccup for about a week and a half. But things are leveling out. They're going well.
Do you feel your caucus is working together? There was some tension.
Caucuses are designed to have tension, right? You've got all these different factions that want their way, and so you'll always have that. But I think that if you've watched what's happening, the caucus is absolutely smoothed out and working a lot better now. Now that that's behind us, absolutely things have smoothed out and moving. And that's why I said a minute ago, you're seeing things move. You're seeing, you'll see a lot of bills come out the House in the next couple of days. The same in the Senate. Things are moving. I think everybody's past that, and they're getting the work of the people done. So things are moving the right way.
Kind of sticking with that, you mentioned on the House floor this week, the majority leader mentioned on the House floor this week that it appeared that some lawmakers might have not been ready to present their legislation. A lot of things being held, some things buried at the bottom of the calendar. What attributed to that? What's going on there?
Well, there's some of the, when you have big issues, you keep doing the lobbying. That lobbying's going on, but get to the point when it's on the floor, you need to move forward. Some of those bills too will have follow-up bills that will replace them. And that makes it tough too, but they need to move faster. And that was kind of what you saw. You guys, it's time to move. We want to shut this thing down. We got to get moving. And that's why you saw the majority leader's comments of either ready or not. And if not, we're going to move it far enough down that we don't have to worry about it going forward. And I think we got that smoothed out yesterday. I think you'll see a few more of those on the top of the calendar move out today. And then things should start rolling again. The problem you have is a lot of those bills are going to take a lot of debate, which you saw yesterday when we got through one bill after all that debate. And you'll see that with some of those bills that you'll hear in the next day or two. But I think you'll see it level out after the next day.
And for Representative Rubel, how would you, evaluate the efficiency of the House floor?
Well,
She says amazing.
I was okay with seeing some of those bills move to the bottom. I think they're very controversial bills that probably, in some instances, may have some very serious legal problems. So I think it was probably prudent to give a little bit more time to figure out, are these even constitutional? What unintended consequences are they going to have? I'm good with that. I'm good with more attention being paid to bills that may have real fallout. Things are moving. There's just an awful lot that still has to move. I always dream, I haven't had spring break with my kids in like 11 years. I always dream that maybe this will be the year, but I don't think it will be.
Question for Speaker Moyle, or anybody else can weigh in. We haven't seen a major school choice bill progress this session. That one tax credit bill is still in rev tax, hasn't been hearing. I'm curious are we going to see a push at the end of the session to get something like that through? And if not, can you speak to why that faltered again?
Oh, you'll see a push. I don't know if it gets through, but you'll see a push. That debate will happen sometime. It may only happen committee if the committee kills it, but I don't think the issue's going away if you've watched the last couple of years. And I think that on the House side, I'm not positive, but I think the majority of the Republican caucus would like to have a vote on that, which will keep that issue alive and well. You'll see a vote on something, though, within the next week.
I think it sounds like at least that it's maybe going to be an expansion of empowering parents, maybe adding some money to that, but not a tax credit.
Yes, I would say I don't see how we have the money. We're, I think, 5% below forecasts. There's this $60 million tax cut now in the 521. We don't have the money to do all these things. I don't think it would be fiscally responsible to bite off something, particularly something that we've seen in every other state has punched a hole in the fiscal bucket. Something that has led to 10x what it was initially promised. That's punched a $300 million hole in the Arizona budget, that has destroyed the Indiana budget, and especially at this stage of session when we're very late and it's hard to see how things could be properly vetted. I don't see how this could jive with the long-term fiscal health of the state, opening up something that is so wildly open-ended in terms of fiscal impact. So obviously it's something our caucus will oppose. We're in the hostage-taking phase of session, so I don't know how many hostages will be held and for how long in order to try to get something like this through. But it's of deep concern, and I think it would not be fiscally consistent with the sound policy of our state.
Were you talking about Medicaid expansion or choice? Just saying.
But I'd take a counterpoint on that. I think there is money available. There was money that's been empowering parents in the program in the past. It's still there. There is adequate money to expand the program slightly. Unlike Arizona and some of the other states that the good representative mentioned, there'll be sideboards on this, there'll be limitations on it. We all realize that our first responsibility under the Constitution is to fund a thorough and free education for our students in Idaho. That'll be our first priority, but we've been very fortunate over the last 5 years to have additional funds available. We've given back $3 billion in tax relief through rebates, almost $1 billion in ongoing, 300 and some million in property tax relief. So we've had the money to do a lot of really good things. And I think this is a high priority to allow some expansion of the Empowering Parents program.
Do you have a number on that?
I don't know. The number I'm hearing is somewhere in the $50 million range, perhaps a little more than that, but I haven't seen the final, and I don't know exactly where it's going to end up.
And do you think the governor would be supportive of that?
With the proper sideboards on it, yes, I think he would be.
Yeah, I apologize if this will take just a second, but I wanted to get members of both parties to weigh in on a couple of large transactions that are taking place in the state of Idaho that legislators individually have expressed concern about. It is the ITD campus and the relocation, and it's also the University of Phoenix. But I'd like to, if I could, have members of both parties address where we're at with both of those large transactions. I know there's JFAC action, I know there's policy bills, but I don't believe I've had a chance to talk with leadership yet about those. And I think the speaker looks like he's ready to start.
So he's pointing fingers again, so.
Well, I may disagree with you on the ITD thing. I think that when the members of the JFAC committee went out and looked at that, they realized that selling that probably wasn't a smart idea. And so I think if you've watched JFAC in the past, they've done all kinds of things that you could say border on policy, like the ITS consolidation, human resource consolidation. There was no bills, they just did it. So I mean, we like to use that as an excuse when it works to our advantage and not when it doesn't. So not there on that one. But I think that the majority right now would support not selling that. That may change, but I think on that building. The issue of Phoenix concerns me with the way they're doing it. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but I think the way they're going about it is improper. And you saw what happened with the committee on the House side when we had that hearing last week. The pro tem and myself have asked for an independent, outside, neutral party to give us another opinion to see if that's correct and if those concerns are justified. If they are, I would assume that there will be an effort to try to find another way to proceed that would hopefully involve the legislature and not the behind closed doors, in my opinion, garbage that happened the way it was handled on the front end of this issue. But to Phoenix's and Apollo's credit, they're now sharing information. We're now hearing more than we've heard in the past, which is helpful. You know, information alleviates concerns. And so I'm glad to hear that they're trying to get that information out, and that will help with that issue.
Thank you so much. If Senator Wenstrow, and then if Senator Winder has his light on as well, I'd love to hear from the senators. Thank you.
I think with the ITD campus and the rigmarole over the sale of the property, I think that's been very unfortunate because I think there was already a developer and a contract going through that, unfortunately, I think legislature sometimes get involved in private contracts and ITD has already moved and those plans are forward. So I hope that is stalled and I just don't think that is the appropriate use of government or state government at that point. I think the University of Phoenix is a really complex and troubling question, right? I think for me, the big question is, if something goes wrong, who's on the hook? And is the state on the hook or is the University of Idaho on the hook? Who's on the hook for all this? And maybe as I read the letter that was drafted and starting to listen to some of the discussions, it probably isn't a bad idea to have a court weigh in on who, who's on the hook, right? That's the big issue because if the state, and as a legislator, I want to make sure the state of Idaho is not on the hook for something if it goes awry, right? And I think that's a fair question to ask. I look forward to hearing more of the discussion and what really is happening, but that's the big question on my mind.
let me take up the ITD one first. And realize I'm a little biased because I served as chairman there for 11 years. The board typically works independently in establishing their budgets, projects, and the legislature stays out of their way. I feel that's the same thing we ought to do on this. They went through a process. They did RFPs. They followed the law. And this is what they chose to do and felt it was best for their organization. The building down there, you could put a lot of money into it. It's kind of one of those money pits that the building itself isn't very efficient. It's an old building that doesn't allow for much ability to remodel it. Going to have to change the whole thing. And so where are you better off? A few years ago, the House led an effort to sell every piece of property around this building because they wanted it on the tax roll. But now they're saying, well, this one's different. And we just have a different point of view on it. So I'm going to continue to ask the tough questions, and I'll try and push back where I can. I think there's a process in place that we should follow. The Phoenix deal with the University of Idaho, I agree that a lot of the information that we probably needed as a legislature, we didn't get. We went to the Attorney General and said, what role does the legislature have in this? And we didn't really get an answer back. So we didn't know what the role was. The House has taken the position that this is important enough to them. They had the hearings and came back with a resolution and dealt with some things like, you know, can you do a 501c3 not-for-profit organization? Does that shield the state? There's probably a better way to do that with a body politic, similar to the Idaho Housing and Finance organization, where it allows them to be independent and it keeps the state from liability. So there's probably a way forward here. People just need to continue to work on it and keep the door open. And I think as you look at the, you know, one of the kind of analogies I heard was when you play hockey, you don't look at where the puck is. You skate to where the puck's going to be. And I think we're seeing huge changes in the way education is going to be delivered. There's more and more demand for courses online, more and more non-traditional students getting further education. So I think the platform of a Phoenix or something like that really is the future for education. And if we can take advantage of it, and if it is indeed the financial benefit that it appears to be, at least what they're saying, then it probably, if we can minimize the risk and take advantage of that, there's probably a path forward.
I'm just going to briefly talk about the very high-level procedural concerns here. I think in the long term, we have to find a way to resolve the tension that has plagued both these deals, because agencies and entities need to be able to negotiate quickly, nimbly, with authority, and be able to do things without 105 people at the table for every transaction. It's just not a feasible way to do business. But that said, they certainly need to be operating within the scope of proper authority. But nobody's going to want to do business with the state if every time they do, they're afraid, well, this whole thing could be unwound as soon as session starts again, and it could all get torn apart by the legislature. So I think it will hurt our agency's ability to drive good bargains and enter into these deals if we don't resolve this at a big picture. In these instances, it may be that they overstepped their authority, or it may be that they were inappropriate. But I think long term, we need to find a better way to make sure that entities have the proper authority at the outset without 105 backseat drivers heading into it.
Maybe one quick comment back on the ITD issue. I personally do not believe the law was followed. Not every agency was notified about the ability of that property, one. Two, every time this state sells property close to this campus, we regret it. I'll use the bank across the street where a couple of years ago, the House wanted to buy it back. We couldn't get the Senate to go there. You can't replace that. Three, does it really make sense to sell a piece of property for the same price that you're going to replace one building on that property for? One building, not to mention everything else that's sitting out there. I would also remind you, ITD received $6 million to fix the HVAC and take care of the issues with that building, and it was hidden from the legislature. One of the things that concerns me when we go through these processes is sometimes we're not given all the information, and sometimes the facts and reality are two different things. So I don't think it's wise to sell it. I'm glad that the senators and the House members of the Appropriation and Finance Committee decided that they thought it was wise to renovate that building. ITD has not moved into the campus up there. They're split because there's not enough room. The timing is the same on either move, and I think it's wise for the state to keep that property because you're going to have a pace to expand as this state grows. And so I agree with the good senator. A few years ago, there was the different people that led the House, and they had different opinions. And I think that now, looking forward, that it's better for the citizens. I'd also remind you, when you're dealing with property, it's not a done deal till you sign on the dotted line. And any of you who bought a house have been experienced that before, where things change, and things have changed, in my opinion.
Before we move on, does anyone else have any other questions on University of Phoenix?
I might just, one real quick question, response, and that is, I really think JFAC stepped way beyond their boundaries with this particular one. They use intent language for how they want money to be spent, but I think it has to be a decision of the legislature whether or not, I think it's a policy of whether we override the board and don't sell the property. So I think, we've got a difference of opinion. The speaker thinks it's okay to do that. I don't think it's okay. And so we're going to look at some type of a resolution, or so that each body would have to vote on it. That's the way you find out what the intent of the legislature is, not in JFAC.
Right, and the only thing I would add to that too is I was a member of JFAC for 4 years. It was a really great committee, one of my favorite experiences in the legislature, led by Representative Maxine Bell and Senator Sean Keogh, two of the most formidable, compassionate, just excellent leaders. And it was very clear in my training in JFAC under these two mentors that we don't make policy in JFAC, and that we should be very cautious about that. And I've seen over the years that philosophy eroded, and now we are seeing bills that have pages and pages of intent language that I think are overstepping the germane committees in policy. And we see budget holes right now in the governor's budget, basically waiting for us to pass a policy instead of actually saying, here's what is needed. And I think that's troubling. And if I were a committee chair of a germane committee, I would be interested in this, and it would pique my interest to actually regain a little bit of control over policy. So I'm in a little bit of disagreement with the speaker on that as well. And I can remember going on some JFAC tours, being with my colleagues, and it was very clear that we were not in the property business, and that we should not be interfering with free market and private organizations, and the philosophy was very strong about selling, and that we should not be monopolizing government, land around the city's capital. And granted, philosophies change, but it's very difficult sometimes to know which way the wind's blowing. So I am not very happy with some of those changes.
Kevin, you had yours?
Yes, I wanted to drill down on a couple of points on Phoenix. Senator Winder, the first question to you. Is there a specific plan to take up the resolution to pass in the House on Tuesday?
There is not a specific plan. We're waiting for some information, getting our opinion back from legal counsel. This will be a third opinion. And we felt it was necessary to do that, basically look at the same questions, but it may provide a way forward and a better way to reduce the risk to the state and clarify the legal entity that would actually have the ownership and the exposure. So that's what we're hoping to do. If that happens, then I think it changes the debate. If people understand better what the risk might be and the exposure, because if you can minimize that risk and take advantage of this platform, I think it's worth the effort to try and move it forward. So we'll wait a few days before we take up the resolution.
And is that an opinion from outside counsel, outside this?
Outside counsel.
Second question, I'll start with the speaker on this, and anybody else wants to weigh in. You talked about hearing more from Phoenix and Apollo. Can you give me a sense of what's been going on maybe behind the scenes since the House vote on Tuesday? It sounds like maybe you've had more meetings with Phoenix and Apollo, maybe U of I, State Board. Has there been briefings, discussions, backfires being lit? Give me a sense.
Well, since the passage of the resolution, you've seen more engagement from those individuals as they've tried to tell us more about what the plans are and what's going on. But and I believe they're in town now meeting with other legislators too, because I hear the legislators saying the same thing, that they're hearing more now and being filled in with more information than they were before. That was one of the hard parts about it, right? Nobody knew, nobody was given a heads up, nobody was in the room, there was no involvement from the legislature at all. And I think that started the issue, and I think it just got worse as they figured out what some of the details of the deal were.
Anybody else want to talk about what's been going on in the past couple of days?
Well, they are in town. One of the things the speaker didn't mention is about, I think it was almost 3 weeks ago now, we had a Zoom call with the University of Phoenix and Apollo, which is the investment group that owns it. We asked questions like, why, if it's making money, would you sell it? The answer was this investment group typically holds an investment for a 5 to 7 year period. That's the way they structure their money and their investments with their investors. That period is over, and so they were trying to do that. But I think the most significant thing that I heard was the current administration's position on student loans to a organization that is for profit and not accredited as, let's say, a traditional college or university. So part of the strategy here is to be able to set up this not-for-profit type of organization, then provide a university that would be accredited, and they have gotten their accreditation now. So I think that's kind of the end goal. It allows them to get the student loans to be able to help the students that need funding. So I think there's a reason for the structure the way it is. Does it address all the risk issues? They probably haven't addressed those yet, but if they change perhaps the structure of that ownership entity, something similar to the Idaho Housing and Finance Organization, there may be a way to really minimize that risk to the state and lower everyone's anxiety level.
Anything else on the University of Phoenix before we move on? Did you have?
Just really quickly, when were you expecting to get that opinion back, and where did you go to?
It's public record. We went to Givens Pursley. The other two major firms that we would normally use were conflicted because they'd already provided opinions and were involved in that process. So we found one that wasn't conflicted. We expect to have a draft back sometime by close of business tomorrow with a finalization sometime on Monday.
And I'm sorry, just to really quickly clarify the conflict firms, I'm guessing, Polytroxel.
Right. And Holland and Hart. Yep.
Is that part of our legal defense fund? Is it funded through that?
Yes.
Yeah,
But it's not the constitutional defense
it's the
fund.
legal
it's ours.
defense fund, yeah,
It's the legislature.
yes.
Drilling down Phoenix and other issues, I've heard repeatedly this session and last session, various lawmakers expressing a desire to get kind of a definitive legal word from the Attorney General's office, and the new Attorney General's administration has not been a big fan of providing opinions about legislation. Where are we at in that process? What's the relationship like with the AG, and what's the plan moving forward? Is it going to continue to be a fleet of private lawyers, or is the legislature looking at hiring someone full-time to be an in-house attorney? What's the plan moving forward with the new AG's administration?
There's about 3 questions there. Yeah, there is let's say, some tension between the legislature and the AG's office. In the previous AG would have a deputy attorney general, give us opinions. Sometimes he'd override those positions, later on. The current AG has taken a position that if I give you a legal opinion, then I may be at a disadvantage if I have to go defend you in court. So he's been reluctant to give us opinions in writing. There are discussions that go on, and he does provide information, I think, to members when they ask questions. I think as far as the relationship with the AG, it's good. We're trying to work with him, and he's working with us. We've got a major case in front of the U.S. Supreme Court that'll be heard next month that we're teamed up on with the Attorney General and outside counsel. So I think what we're trying to do is use the best talent we can find for specific cases. And there are cases where you won't find the talent in the Attorney General's office, and you've got a very special issue that you go find outside counsel for. So I think we'll continue to do that. I don't think the legislature wants to bring on a bunch of full-time attorneys that really we only have a lot of demand for maybe 4 or 5 months out of the year.
So I'm going to jump in. I think this is a huge problem that I can certainly say personally has substantially diminished my ability to legislate. And I think it's really been a big hit to the legislature as a whole in terms of being able to do reliable work. We used to be able to go to the Attorney General and get a quick turnaround legal opinion on any bill that would say, you know, oh, this bill raises this constitutional problem, it conflicts with this federal law, or no, it's fine, or oh, it conflicts with this other statute. It was incredibly helpful. We would get that advice in time for the floor so that we could come up, we could distribute it, and we'd say, hey, before you vote on this, you should know that these are some legal problems or things to think through. People would sometimes revise their legislation to resolve those legal conflicts. We made much better law when we all had access to reliable, timely legal counsel. Now we have Elizabeth Bowen, who's terrific. She is the only lawyer from LSO for the legislature. She won't give you opinions on other people's laws. You can come to her for your own bill and say, hey, does my bill have problems? But you can't get any legal input, and she's just one person, and there's 105 of us. We need more legal counsel that will give us these opinions, and not just on our own bills. I need to know if the stuff I'm voting on other people's bills is legal or not, or what the problems are. And in good faith, I think those people would want to resolve those problems. I don't want to pass a bill that's going to get thrown out in court or that's going to cause untold, unintended bad consequences. This is a huge problem. We can't operate like this in a vacuum. Now, I understand my good friends on either side of me have access to their $4 million legal slush fund where they can go hire outside counsel. We don't, the rest of us don't have access to that. And maybe we can negotiate so we get a chunk of that money and we can go hire Givens, Pursley, and Holland Troxel and have the full law firm employment plan going in place for our law firms around town. That would be great. Well, not great for taxpayers, but we don't have that right now. We have nobody to turn to. We are doing the best job we can to guess in the dark, Google, try to find law school interns to poke into this stuff for us. It's not a viable situation right now, and we're going to be making mistakes unless we address this. So I am profoundly unhappy with the current status quo. Maybe we need to move some of the staff out of the AG's office and over into LSO where they can answer all of our legal questions. But right now, I think we're operating in legal darkness, and it's a real problem.
I would just jump in and add there's not much more to add to that, but you know, I was on my iPad and I was looking up Title 67, Chapter 14, Attorney General, and it says right here, one of the duties of the Attorney General is to give an opinion in writing without a fee to the legislature or either house thereof, or any senator or representative, and to the governor, etc. And that is the statute by which we've operated for years. And I can remember in my time when the previous Attorney General was here, there was an open door policy regardless of your party, because there was a value and love of the law to make sure that we were reaching constitutional measures and making sure that we weren't writing law that was conflicting or harming the Constitution, right? Wasn't giving us an opinion about you should or shouldn't do it, but here's how it's going to impact current statute and so forth. And there have been several bills that I thought of this session. I wish I would have had somebody to reach out to get an opinion, because it's affected my vote. And when you don't know and you can't definitively understand it, you have to vote no, because you risk passing something, you know, that could be a detriment to the state and the Constitution. So, I mean, our attorney that's supposed to be representing us and is actually suing us more often than he's representing us. I think the people of Idaho need to understand the problem that presents. And I wonder what we should do. What other means do we take when people break the law? Because obviously the law is being broken.
Mr. Speaker, any final thoughts there?
Not really. There was a bill you saw last year in the House that would have put a time limit on that statute. There's talk of running that again, which would force it to be done. I haven't seen it come out. So there's still talk around because there's some frustration with a lot of legislators on both sides of the aisle with the inability to get some opinions on what they're supposed to do. And I think that's why it's in statute. But I think that Senator Winter summed it up well. You know, we're getting along really well with the Attorney General. We're talking and things are moving in the right direction. There's just this hiccup on the opinion issue. And I would assume that if it's not resolved soon, you will see that bill come out and it will probably pass this time that puts a time limit. So, because now it's very bipartisan, the concern about not being able to get some help from the AG's office.
And I might just in closing comment, you know, it may be that through this process, the AG really does look at the overall view of how does he defend the bills that and laws that we pass. And so it may take a reassignment of some people in his office to LSO or something like that. So those discussions are open and ongoing, and we'll kind of see how this all plays out.
Yeah, and he's in a box too, if you think about it, right? Because if he issues an opinion, and the past Attorney General kind of had a wall between him and the opinion, like the good senator mentioned that he could say, well, I don't agree with the opinion. When he puts the opinion out, then he puts himself in the box and the state in the box as the state's legal authority. So there may be a better way to handle this, like the good senator says, but I know that it's a tension with a lot of members, but we'll figure a path forward as it boils up.
Sort of related, one thing that AG could weigh in on is whether House Bill 521 runs afoul of the single subject rule. And I have no idea whether someone would sue if that bill passes and becomes law. But I guess Speaker Moyle, are you comfortable with the risk that someone sues and that whole thing gets thrown out? I mean, the tax cut, the facilities funding, all of it.
It's a good tax bill. It does good things for schools. And I support the bill, and I hope they pass it, and we can move on and build some buildings and get some tax relief. So I'm okay with it.
I think from a single subject, and Senator Schroeder and our body talked quite a bit about this with all of us about the court cases that have been out there. The court's been very lenient and not interfering with what the legislature says is a piece of legislation that meets the requirement. It's very difficult for them to come in and say, I think even if someone did sue us, that we were outside of our bounds because of some wording in it. If you look at the Constitution, it talks about single subject, but it gives quite a broad lenience to the legislature as to what that means. So I think when you really look at it, does the title, for instance, cover all the subject matters? It does. How is it captioned? It's captured under taxation. Taxation's a pretty broad issue. It covers everything we do as far as funds are involved. So it would be an interesting case to take to the Supreme Court. I think it'd be very difficult to prove it wasn't a single subject, even though it has different seemingly unrelated issues.
I would just say really quickly before Representative Rebell jumps in there, you know, regardless if it meets the single subject law or part of the Constitution or not, as the senator said, there's broad interpretation, and it seems like there's too much discretion as to when we determine it's a single subject and not. And this particular bill has about 20 things different that it doesn't. I mean, there's a line for, there's an appropriation for public defense in the bill. And I know I was sitting here thinking about this as I sat down and saw your faces. I remember the beginning of the session and listening to the governor talk about facilities and feeling so hopeful that, oh, we're going to finally address the facilities concerns for our schools and the state this year. And I was so hopeful and excited, and then when I saw the actual bill, it wasn't really a facilities bill anymore. It's a tax bill, for sure. We have an income tax rebate, once again. We have stipulations on the funding, so if you take it over time, it goes into the 292 formula that cascades down, and you really get very little in facilities money, but more in property tax relief. I mean, it takes away the bond equalization fund, which has been so essential for equity for rural schools. I mean, the Boise schools probably won't be affected by that fund being taken away and put into that other funding formula, but I think it's gonna harm rural schools in Idaho. And over time, as we continue to decrease revenue over and over, that's going to harm the funding of schools. The governor started out with a grand hope of $2 billion. Now we're down to maybe $1. And I'm really troubled by the number of things that are being covered in this one bill, because it's not a school facilities bill anymore. We have the power to make it that. Now, I understand negotiation. Everybody can't get what they want, all that. But this is far afoul from a school facilities bill, and there are just so many. And another, we take the election day away again. Used to be that a school district could hold a bond and levy election any day they wanted. Then we said, oh, well, let's consolidate that. Now it's 4, now it's 2, now it's 1. That's problematic. And I think that will create additional stranglehold on schools to actually fund when the legislature does fall short, in particular if we don't have the revenue. So I forget the original question, but I had to pile on there on this lovely 521.
Yeah, if this is,
Like lovely.
if this bill passes the single subject rule, then there is no single subject rule. I mean, if somebody challenges this in court, this would affect, and if this thing were upheld, it would nullify any concept of a single subject rule. Because sure, you can say, hey, it has to do with government. Government's a subject. Well, sure, then there's no such thing as a single subject rule. And that's where we'd be. Because if you have a bill that eliminates elections, funds public defense, reduces the income tax, ends the bond equalization fund, I mean, there is hardly a corner of government that this bill doesn't touch. So if a court believes in the single subjects rule, then this would fail it. Now, that said, nobody may sue. It only comes to a head if somebody sues, and we have a lot of serious desperation around the state. And I think in most cases, as Senator Wintrow said, this will give crumbs at best, but they may be so desperate for crumbs that they don't sue. Now, Boise, I'm really concerned, and I actually voted against this bill, even though my top issue for years has been school facilities funding. But this came with so much other stuff, I couldn't bring myself to vote for it, because the amount of money going to Boise schools is so trivial. A lot of it's a shell game where you're taking away lottery funds and calling it facilities, but they were already getting that for facilities. But you're looking at a $60 million permanent loss of revenue, which is going to hit operations funding. And I wasn't sure that the $4 million or whatever that Boise schools are going to get spread over 46 different schools. So that's basically carpet cleaning money or something. I'm not sure that isn't more than offset by losing August elections, losing the long-term ability to actually pass real facilities funding, and the long-term loss of operations, not to mention what it does to bond equalization and everything else. So in short, I guess the question was single subject. I see no imaginable way that this could possibly pass the single subject threshold, but that said, probably nobody will sue, so it probably won't come to a head, and it'll probably go into effect.
Jimmy first.
Mr. Speaker, where are we with launch negotiations? You had JFAC pass it out with the governor's recommended funding level, but it hasn't really come up, and I don't know if I'm missing it, but I don't even see it printed.
Yeah, the JFAC has sent the money out. I don't know where it's at. After this meeting, we'll try to figure out what's going on there. There is a bill, I believe, today in the Senate that starts putting some constrictions on launch. I think that there's a lot of individuals that if there was a little more clarity on what the money could be used for, where it goes, how it's done, then I think that it sails out. There's not a problem. But right now, I know the Senate has a bill, and there's some drafts on the House side trying to make sure that it's not abused. One of the biggest concerns people have is that the Workforce Development Council, which is 36 people, only 2 of which are elected, giving them $80 million to do this is a concern. That there's some concerns that there ought to be some legislative oversight, somebody who's elected and not a whole bunch of big business guys making those decisions. So you're seeing those talks happen. but I don't know that anything will come to a head till that funding hits the floor and everybody goes out. But again, the Senate has a bill today. I think it's Senator Lentz. I haven't seen it. I've just heard about it. And I think that will hopefully start the ball rolling, that we can find a solution to put some sideboards around this thing so it doesn't turn into a whole Donnybrook.
Yeah, I think, I haven't seen the Senate bill either, but it has been printed and introduced. But it does deal with the issues that people are concerned about, and they were concerned about this launch was sold as a high demand jobs, certifications for plumbers, electricians, people in healthcare, the really high demand jobs. And kind of the way it came out, people have fear that you could go for the first 2 years and use launch for what you can, to be a welder or a plumber or whatever, a nurse or whatever, and then totally change to some not in demand major at a 4-year school. And so there's some concerns there. So I think you'll see those types of limitations in that Senate bill that put some sideboards on it and keep it more directed, establishing some priorities for, the number of job openings for what are the highest demand jobs. And it may not necessarily be one job that's got the most openings. It may be a welder, it may be, someone in the service field. So I think those are the kind of things that we're trying to look at so we can get enough support to get it going. Because it's really needed out there in our workforce development. Our employers are saying, this is one of the best things that can happen is to make our workforce better educated and make them available. And frankly, it helps young people to get started and to have higher paying jobs and pay back higher taxes as they make more money in life.
Yeah, I haven't seen the actual language specifically of the bill. I would hope that it doesn't limit things too much, because I think the governor had in his presentation at the beginning of session where all those applications were going into, and I saw a lot in healthcare, I saw engineering, I saw teaching. So I saw, all the things that we're mentioning. I would hope that the policy puts in place, again, in demand, and those are in demand, and doesn't limit, 4-year, 2-year, this or that, but really, again, is a support to the thousands of students who really need it and want it. So I will, the jury's out, but I think based on some of the conversations I've heard that the policy will not be that, will be supportive and helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, again, I haven't seen it. So, I can't imagine it's a huge problem happening out there, but I don't know if it gives people comfort. I can't imagine a lot of people are like, haha, now that I've studied 2 years for an in-demand thing, I'm going to go switch and make sure I never get a job. So I don't know. That said, I'm an English major, so, I'm okay with the non-in-demand professions. But I'd love to see what this policy looks like. But it's critical that we get this thing across the finish line and keep it funded.
A little bit more than 5 minutes left.
Yeah, I wanted to check in with both parties on this one, and I know there are other branches of government involved, but I wanted to find out where the state of Idaho stands in its ability to carry out an execution following the events of last week. If both parties can respond, please.
You look at the history of, executions in our state and around the country, and there have been some real failures. This last one was probably one of the worst, but there'll be ongoing discussions. I don't know that there's a path forward at this point. So I think we still support, capital punishment. So I don't think that has gone away. But we've got to figure out a lot better way to deal with it than what just happened.
Yeah, thank you for that question. That was this situation that happened is unfortunate all the way around, and I really feel for my sense of the staff at the Department of Corrections, whether they agree with philosophy of the state or not, are professional, And when they called that off, they were probably being compassionate and so forth. I mean, they tried several times, and that is stressful for everyone. So I don't fault or blame anyone for that. And I feel like the staff that I know probably, they really were trying very hard to uphold the philosophy of the state regardless. I really question the death penalty because of the costs, right? How long has this been going on? And we know through research and data that this costs millions and millions of dollars to the state. I know it's really hard for folks who experienced, a loss and somebody has done something as heinous as the acts that he's done. But I think, I said this once before when I first started this job, and I was in judiciary and rules and making decisions about things I'd never seen, and I went into a prison for the very first time, and I realized a lot of things about how we treat people in prison is a real direct reflection on who we are as a society. And so I do think, there's a lot more for us to discuss as a culture and a state about the philosophy and the undertaking of the death penalty itself. But I think in this particular situation, it was unfortunate for everyone around, regardless of how you wanted that to go or not. And my thoughts are with the staff, the families, and everybody that was there.
A couple side notes. I certainly hope that some methodology can be resolved here so that we don't end up ever having to utilize that firing squad option, because I was fervently opposed to that. That is grotesque. It's beyond whatever your feelings are on the death penalty. That is next level. I was sent some of the pictures from the last firing squad shooting in Utah. It's just, whatever feelings on the death penalty, that is not a business the state should be in. And it's just the total dismemberment and violent, gory destruction of a human body. But beyond that, I would just urge on a side note, there was a bill going through this session that would increase the number of capital cases, I think, ninefold, which was Representative Scogg's bill to impose death penalty on those engaging in lewd conduct with a minor. When we see the staggering costs and complications, this is going to cost the state millions and millions of dollars. I think we need to certainly be careful that we're not just willy-nilly adding on more cases that are going to lead to similar complications and this drastic increase in the number of instances like what we saw the other day with Mr. Creech.
I really don't have anything to add. We may disagree on the firing squad, and we did, I think, last year give them some money to make that available. But and I do support the death penalty, and I hope that we learn from this lesson and do a better job in the future. Because there's we need to get a handle on this. This is serious stuff, and we need to make sure it doesn't happen again. So I hope we use it as a learning lesson.
Real quick, Mr. Speaker, on that note, do you have confidence in the state of Idaho to go forward following what happened last week? At this point, what we know today.
I do, and I think what happens is sometimes we have to have bad experiences to learn, like I said a minute ago, and make sure it doesn't happen again. And I think we will all learn from this experience, and I think that we'll be better prepared next time. And so while it's tragedy what happened, I think that we'll do a better job because of what happened. I think we will learn from that experience.
We have time for one more question. I'm going to take moderator's privilege real quick and ask it for the, I know. For Senator Winder and Speaker Moyle, after we saw about 7% turnout in caucuses on Saturday, do you want to see that again in 4 years, or do you think the legislature is going to accept it?
Well, I think, the party has the ability to do whatever they want to do as far as how they determine their candidates. And that's true for whether it's Republican or Democratic parties. The legislature can set elections, and we tried to do that last year by consolidating all the primaries to May. It got messed up in the way it was drafted. We corrected that in the Senate and sent it over to the House, and they gave it a hearing, but then quickly no motion was made, and so we didn't fix the primary. I'll actually introduce tomorrow morning in State Affairs a bill that would allow us to have basically an election that would be in May, that would be a presidential primary on the ballot, but it would be advisory. The party could use it or not use it. It wouldn't interfere with what they've already done because the state really can't determine how they get their delegates. So hopefully, I was a big supporter of the consolidation. I was also in 2012 when the original bill to move the primary, presidential primary to March. I supported that, and I was a sponsor for that, with the idea that we were going to get all these candidates to come to Idaho and we were actually going to have an influence on the process. That didn't happen. So everybody agreed, let's consolidate it back to May. There's another bill out there floating around that would put the primary in April, but I don't think we gain much from that if the party doesn't agree to consolidate and have the primary election at the same time. So I don't know what the outcome of that will be, but my bill is just going to allow people to vote in May and express their preference. Party can use the information or not.
Speaking for the Democrats, we were beyond frustrated by how this played out. I would actually briefly correct one thing the good pro tem said. There was a motion made in committee on the fix, but the chairman of the committee did not recognize that motion. Representative Green tried to make the motion to move the fix to the floor so that we would have a primary, and the chairman did not recognize her to make that motion and called the committee hearing over. We have tried everything to try to get a primary. We are deeply concerned at the disenfranchisement of people and how difficult it is. Shift workers, people with childcare challenges, people with mobility challenges, veterans, seniors, you name it. So many people are shut out of a caucus process. And we did everything we could to try to get a primary, but we can't do it without help from our friends across the aisle. We do not have enough votes to get a state primary on our own. So we made the motion. We voted for everything that would have brought us a primary. We signed every petition there was in the interim to try to call us back for a special session to get a primary. But we signed the one for March and the one for May. We frankly didn't really care as long as there was some kind of primary that would open it up to everybody to vote. But at some point, we just were not able to get enough of our Republican colleagues to go along to preserve a primary. And so, we are kind of the roadkill in this situation where we are being forced into a caucus that we never wanted and did everything in our powers to try to avoid so that we could have a primary. But here we are. But certainly we would support anything that would get us back a primary.
Remember, primary or not, the party has the choice. And I think that came from a lawsuit from the Democrats in California and went to the U.S. Supreme Court. So the party still has control of that, even if we come up with a primary date. And I think that some people had a good experience and some people had a bad experience. And I think as those discussions go forward since the primary took place, we'll have a better feel when these legislators get home and hear what their constituents see on what they want to do. But again, I emphasize the party, just like the good senator mentioned, the party still has total control whether it's a primary or caucus.
And the only thing I would add to that is I saw a headline that said 93% of Republicans could not vote in the caucus. And so I think that is really telling, that headline right there. We want people to vote. And if a caucus is a place where, you can't get to, it's unmanageable, the lines are too long, the parking, whatever it is, I think it's essential that we open it up to make sure that everyone can vote, whether you're in the state or not. You might be overseas in the military, whatever. But that was a telling headline to me.
With that, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.